Okay, this is the second part of, well, I was going to make two videos about Chinese culture. This is part two. And if you haven't watched part one, well, what's important to understand that I don't like to view culture as some wishy-washy thing. Essentially, I want to compare relative differences of key sort of crux, very important social behaviors, and most notably, and that is the tendency or lack thereof to deceive, to lie. Okay, um, and thereby manipulate. Okay, so at any rate, where I left off before, uh, Chinese managers are much more manipulative, even bullying, you could say, than American managers. Maybe there is just as much overt bullying in the United States. I mean, they'll just go at you, right? But in China, and they'll tell you why, or they'll try to give you a reason. In China, it's not like that. They try to bully you without you knowing it. But you'll see, you'll get my sense, and hopefully I'll be able to I'll sort of forewarn you. I'll explain, and I'm going to give some specific examples right now of exactly what I mean, so that you can be, you know, forewarned is forearmed, right? So here's an example. I was teaching at a large English school, very large English school. Well, I mean, it was well known, it's established, teaching adults. And I had taught at a number of different centers at this school. And the one in particular, I had a manager who was really a classic case of, he was worse than most. And this guy actually, well, let me tell you what I didn't like, and I'm sure that you won't like if you're from the United States or Canada or Australia. Um, he wanted to get me to do something, and I didn't want to do it. So he wouldn't take no for a fucking answer. All right, either you fire me or you don't. No, what they do, they don't take no for an answer. This is how really insensitive and uncultured they can be. All right, now this is just the truth about it. Okay, I needed to take more time off to get something done that I needed to have done, and he didn't like that. And it related to a department within the company. And I had a mild dispute with that other member of the company. And as a matter of fact, okay, this also related to going and getting a visa. It was my work visa. I was processing a work visa. This is not the one in Beijing. I believe in the previous video I mentioned a situation where a school up north in Beijing failed to pay me all of my salary. But this is a separate situation. Now, I needed more time. The fact is, this manager was new. I knew more about the visa process than he did. And I knew more about how much time it would take to go from Hong Kong and back, and as well as preparing your visa application, going in, submitting it, waiting, getting your new work visa, etc. Okay? I had done it before I knew. All right? And so I said, it's not going to happen. I need another day. And I said, if you don't like it, tough patooties, right? SOL for you. I'm going to take that extra day because I know I need it. And so essentially, in order to, and I did, and I was right, but nonetheless, in order to punish me, what he did was he arranged a training. Sometimes you have to go to trainings, and he raised this dispute that I had a problem with another department because I had had another dispute with this other department saying, no, it's foolish for you to assume I'm going to take that time. It needs this much time. It wouldn't get done in 2 days like that. For me to go in the morning and be back, their time estimate was not realistic. Okay, it was wrong. All right. And the result would have been that I ended up coming to class late or missing part of it, and then I'd get blamed for it. But okay, so nonetheless, what he did was then send me to a training, and the title of the training was Learning to Cooperate with Other Departments. And given the context, it was obvious that this training was all about me. So he tried to use that to sort of embarrass me in front of my other teachers or give me the message, look how much power I have. But he wouldn't only do that. That wasn't the only form of passive aggression. I'll give you an example. He wanted me to teach certain classes in a different way. This is a guy who has no experience teaching himself. Um, and he, regardless of whether it's more effective or more palatable or more satisfying the students, they like it more. I still wouldn't have done it just because that's not the way I run my class. Even if my class ends up being run, those particular classes with those activities, even if my class ends up getting run and managed in a way that only benefits 15% of the class or only 20% is really interested in it, I'm going to maintain it as a real English class. And so I do that. But what he'd do, he wouldn't take no for an answer. For example, in time, in close proximity to my refusal, he would do things. For example, he would sit down next to me and start talking to me about how I should take my notes. And he could tell I get irritated by this, so he knows that I don't like that. So the result is, and I'd say, well, okay, can you move, all right, I need to prepare my lessons. Can you please move away? You're sitting right next to me. And he said, well, I just need to stay here. I can stay here. And so he would literally position his body physically close enough to me so that theoretically he could look at what I'm doing. Whoa. I mean, it's passive aggression, right? It's a form of, I guess you could say emotional abuse. So another example would be if I needed to go to class at a certain time, he would, for example, I would be walking in one direction in a hallway and he'd be coming the other, and he'd look at his watch as, well, there's only 1 minute left, and he'd move his body over to the left kind of, and to block my way, not completely, just partially, right? It's not a complete, they get into the gray area so as to make you feel as though they're about to commit a violation or do something that's kind of nasty, but maybe they don't quite do it, and he slows you down, it kind of impedes where you're going, right? It's passive aggressive behavior. It's, well, where are you going? You have 1 minute left before class starts. That kind of thing. No one likes that, right? What else would he do? He'd say, oh, well, I need to watch your class today. I need to observe how you're doing, sometimes without notice. And so I've got another person in the room, that sort of thing. Now, what I have done in certain situations, I've just refused. And in certain contexts, you can do that. In other contexts, you can't. Now, at the end of the day, this guy, I complained about him, and I eventually got a transfer away from that school. And 2 people had asked for transfers before that, and they were refused, and they cited him as the reason. So I knew that I had sort of a backdrop of credibility, the fact that there had been previous complaints, and so I was granted a transfer away from this guy. Now, it turned out about 6 months later, 7 months later, 2 people quit on the same day, citing this guy. All right? But the fact is, his behavior is very common amongst other Chinese managers. But his was over the top, such that he wasn't going to get any American teacher or any British teacher, any Canadian teacher to go along with that shit. But they will really push it, okay? And so the way you handle that, and I'll give you another example where another teacher did the same. I was late arriving to school. It wasn't my fault. This is at another large school. Well, let me first go back and tell you how I resolved that. The way I resolved that was I called up the manager, and I knew I wasn't bluffing, and so they could tell I'm not bluffing. I had developed before I went to the negotiating table and asking for this transfer, and they didn't grant it to me right away. He said, "Well, I'll come out there. I'll come." The manager above him said, "I'll come out there. Let me come out there." Okay. The way I dealt with it in a way that worked was before I went to that higher level manager, I worked out what my bottom fucking line was. I didn't go off screaming. And here's another thing, I didn't fucking lose my cool, although I may have wanted to. And just, you can tell by me talking about it right now, it's fucking insane. The guy in the United States, I had one British teacher there who hated his fucking guts. I hated his guts. He hated his fucking guts. He came to me and said, "Rob, I've been to America a couple times, but I think in England, and I tell me, is it true? This guy in America, someone would fucking punch him. I mean, someone would haul off and just fucking take a take a swing at this fucker." And I said, "Yes, absolutely, absolutely. This guy is over the top." But here's the thing: those kinds of behaviors, um, even when you tell them, "I refuse to teach the class that way. I won't do it that way. It's not that big a deal." They won't take no for an answer. They'll go around and try to engage in emotional abuse to get you to do it. They won't respect the fact that you say, "No, I'm not going to do that," and leave it at that. They'll keep at you. They literally have that lack of respect for another human being. They don't look at you as an autonomous sort of creature, okay? They don't care about morality that way. It's fucking sad, but they don't, okay? It's important. They don't. The majority of them don't. Now, I had another case where this is, I think, more instructive. All right, well, no. Obviously, I don't have this little talk that well prepared. It's extemporaneous. It's just, testifying, I guess you could say. But at any rate, the key is going and knowing what your fucking bottom line is, not getting angry at all. I went to the manager and I said, "Look, okay, here's reason one, reason two. Here's another teacher who complained. These are the specific things he did. This is really," and I didn't make it a Chinese versus the West. I didn't make it, you're so uncivilized versus we are. Um, Even if in relative terms that might be the case. All right. I mean, if 10 people were surveyed, if 10 people looked at this, they would say that. But you didn't go into that at all. I used cold, hard politics. And I thought very clearly about how much do they need me? Do they have another person to replace me? Hello. Um, and what am I going to do? And the guy said, "Okay, I hear what you're saying." He said, "Okay, look, I'm going to transfer you, but I can't transfer you this very moment. Can you give me 3 weeks? Can you give me a month? I'm going to work things around, but I'm going to transfer you." I said, "Okay, I can take another month of this for you to get me the fuck over there." And I was working full time for them. You get bonuses. You don't want to leave. I like the bonuses at 6 months and at a year. I didn't want to leave. Okay. And I was really digging it. I was sad to fucking leave that school. I loved that mall. I really was. Now, it turns out later that, so I was ready. I fucking pushed it. I said, "Look, I'm ready to go." I told him I will quit. I am done with this guy. He is over the fucking top. I will quit. I will leave. And I might have even said, "And I'll also want my bonuses because I've been wrongfully forced to leave." He said, "Okay, I'm going to transfer you." All right. But I went there. I wasn't fucking bluffing either. All right. But I was very calm, very collected, very respectful about it. I didn't raise my fucking tone of voice one bit. Don't ever raise your tone of voice with them. All right. You can show your anger a little bit, but be very careful and never, ever make it a Chinese versus American or Chinese versus Canadian or Chinese versus the West. Don't ever do that. Okay. Or in America, we do it this way, so fuck, don't say that either. All right. Now, here's a little slightly more instructive example. At another school, the same kind of school, I had a manager. I was late because something every school has sort of an administrative assistant that's in charge of the schedule, and believe me, they're plenty good at fucking up and then trying to blame it on you. It's amazing. It's fucking amazing the way they do it in shameless ways. All right. So that happened one time. I was late, and the manager at the school, for some reason, she had never asked to come observe my classes and take notes and give me a little criticism. Essentially, it was what these things entail when they come and observe your class, right? Uh, all of a sudden, the first time, it was the day when I was late. Okay, I missed a class because I was like an hour and a half late, whatever, because of what they did, whatever. And she said it right before my class started. And so I was like, oh, okay. And during the first like five, she said, I'll be coming in about halfway through. And I was already on my way to class. So she didn't give me a chance. See, it's very subtle. She had planned out the move. She had planned her move. Okay, shamelessly, in a cold way, in a very calculated way, because she knew that I wouldn't like that. So she'd do something that you don't like, right? If you do something they don't like, they try to give it an emotional. That's it, always. Okay, it's power, right? It's this real politic. It's sort of, you know, as I've always said, Confucianism, or at least as I've said for the last 4 or 5 years, um, although you know, Confucianism is like watered down Machiavellianism. Okay, it's like watered down Machiavelli. Okay, now, all right. About within the first 10 minutes of that class, I realized, oh fuck, she's doing it. So I said, hey, I analyzed how much they need me at this school. I realized, oh, they're short. They're really short teachers right now. Um, I've got two other schools that want me. Um, my bargaining position is so strong. I stopped the class today. You guys, I'll be back in a minute. I went over to her, and this is what I said. I said, oh yeah, today's not good for you to. Now I'm totally going against the grain. Usually people they don't have a choice about having managers observe their classes and doing that. And they do it periodically, tell you this or that. I said, yeah, today's not good for that. Maybe in a couple weeks, I'll decide then. Oh, fuck. I think I said it in front of somebody. I mean, it was like a boom. I didn't even try to jab at her. I just went right up to her. Here's a straight right. Boom. And I take a look. And she knew what the fuck was up. She would know what the fuck was up. I'm not going to. I mean, look, I know how much you fucking need me. You can think I'm gonna fucking do that, but it was all very polite within the context of socially acceptable discourse. I had sort of an air of authority as I relayed to her this information, about whether her application to view one of my classes would be accepted, just like that. All right, real politics. And I could give a fucking goddamn whether other teachers accept it or don't accept it, right? Because at that particular branch, they definitely needed me. Um, I've now moved further away from there, so I don't actually need to teach at that branch anymore. Big fuck it, so there you go. But she took it, and she didn't say a thing, and she couldn't, because she'd be up shit creek at that time to have me just go run off, right? So this is you need to. They do not. The moral of the story here is they have no fucking principles when it comes to dealing with conflict. It's like you open that cupboard and it's completely bare. It's not as though they're immoral, they're amoral along these lines. They just don't have that there. Okay? It's sad and it's scary when you realize that, especially when you understand that this principle, this fact, it's not a belief, it's not a theory, it's not an idea, it's not an opinion. To me, it's an undeniable fact that I have to deal with every day. When this fact is true for 80% of the population, 85% of the population, that cupboard is fucking bare. It's barren. There's nothing there. Okay, that this psycho-moral, spiritual aspect of being a person, um, is not there, it's rather startling. Okay, it's rather startling. On the other hand, you can see, at least in form, at least on the surface, there are increasingly large numbers of Chinese that are saying, look, hey, I'm into the Ten Commandments, I'm into the Bible. It's interesting. Wow. I like you know, three or four of the commandments are directly or indirectly related to deception and lying, right? Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not slander and gossip. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Okay, boom, I've got it. Uh, Number four, thou shalt not use unfair weights and measures, right? It relates to business and transactions. There, at that time during the Old Testament, if you went and bought some grain and they had a scale there and you had a few stones, you would weigh how much grain you were purchasing, right? So it's deception to sort of tilt the scales without the purchaser knowing, how much they're buying. Is it really this amount, right? So there's four of the commandments that deal directly with the issue of deception, deceit, lying, untruthfulness. They're key, right? Um, okay. Now, now, of course, the Bible doesn't lay out a plan for democracy, but it laid a foundation for it. Without the theories and principles that were already the foundation that was already in the Bible, you wouldn't have gotten to democracy. The notion that everyone is treated the same in front of the law, everyone is the same in front of the eyes of God, that idea of law, right? You wouldn't have gotten to a constitutional democracy, right? We have our Constitution, our law, our notion of law, and our concept of it, which comes from the Scripture, which gives birth to democracy, right? It comes out of that, all right? But that's neither here nor there. Um, but it's startling when you see that this aspect of social development um, is not present. Wow. It makes you go, wow, Kings and Chronicles, those parts of the Bible that you thought were so boring, they're actually really interesting. Okay.